Right, we're back here, and this is the third last video in this sorting program. If you're struggling with this particular program, this part of the video is going to, of the three videos, is going to basically show you how to incorporate the sort algorithm into your program. Important document is this document that I've shared with you in the folder. It shows you the algorithm. That is really important. Okay, and it also shows you what it looks like in your VB code. Okay, let's look at the algorithm first. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy the algorithm down to the end while. So begin and end, I'll leave that out. Everything inside it, I'm going to copy. I'm going to have to be careful here because it's the variable names I'll need to maintain. So I move to my VB. Right, remember, it's sort scores, so that is the subroutine I'm going to use. Now, I'm lucky here because some of the variables I'm using in this are only going to be used in this particular subroutine. So I'm going to define them just in this subroutine, and I'm going to work through them one at a time. First one is end unsorted. That's the first variable I need to define in my little subroutine here. So I go dim, end unsorted as an integer. Okay, end unsorted equals number of scores in the array. Now, what is the number of scores in your array again? It's up here in the code, total num scores. So that becomes total num scores. So you've got to understand moving from the pseudocode to the code is tricky, and it does require a fair bit of sort of thinking on your part. We hit the while loop. While end unsorted is greater than 1. Yep, they're all defined. I don't need to worry about those. I equals 1. So I'm introducing I here. Do I need to define I, or do I need to make sure it's not used elsewhere? It's used elsewhere, but only as as an array index. So I can use it again here. I is 1. Max equals score I. Well, max is going to be a dim I define here, and it's going to be an integer. You will notice as you go through this algorithm, it's very similar to the maximum value of the array that we did earlier this year. Now, the next variable I need, score, should be defined up here. Notice different scores. So I'm going to have to make that scores. That's a good pickup. Scores. Pos max is a dim I need to define here. Pos max as an integer. It's the position of the max in the array. Pos max. While I is less than unsorted. Yeah, that's okay. It's got it underlined. I think it's to do with this end while. I think it is to do with that end while, but we'll come back to that. Increment I, that means add 1 to I. So I can do a few things here, but I'm just going to make it I equals I plus 1. That's incrementing I. If scores I is greater than max, then max equals scores I. Pos max equals I, and if, and if. And while, now that's got to have a space there. I think that will fix up the squiggles. It does. Swap, I'm going to come back to that. Decrement end unsorted. That means take 1 off end unsorted. So end unsorted equals end unsorted minus 1. And while, stick a space in there, I'm good. Now, swap. This is an interesting one because if you read the document back here, you'll notice that swap is actually doing those three things. So you've got to replace that swap with these similar three lines. What are you swapping? You're swapping this score at POSMAX with the score at end unsorted. So pay attention to this one because this is what you do. What am I doing here? How do I go back to my code? Here we go. Go back to the code there. Sorry. Okay, so the swap's tricky. So here we go. I'm going to keep swap there just to show you, let you know what I'm doing. I have to introduce a temporary storage spot. Notice here, sorry, temp. I have to have a temporary storage spot. So I'm going to introduce a variable back in my program up here in the dim. I'm going to call it, what do you call it? Temp score. So it's a temporary spot where I store my score. Okay, here's the swap. Temp score equals the scores at where? At POSMAX. Scores at POSMAX take on the value of scores at end unsorted. And then the third line of my sort algorithm is that the scores at end unsorted has to equal that temp score. That's my three lines for swapping the two values. So in other words, you imagine when you're sorting some numbers, you have to, at some stage, swap some numbers, okay? Because you're putting them in a new order. All right, I reckon we're nearly done on that. So I've just converted that little algorithm into VB code. I dimmed the variables I'm just using here. I've got some variables that have been dimmed earlier, the I, for example, the scores. I can still use them here, okay, and their values will change, yep. Oh, hang on. It's changing the array scores, isn't it? Okay, so let's be mindful. If we scroll back up to the top, remember I created this array sort scores. It was going to be the array that had the sorted scores in it, and scores was going to be. I was going to keep scores the way it was. Look, how about we just leave it as it is, and then we can talk about it later if we have to. All right. So one last thing I need to do. I need to now, having sorted the data, I need to display it. How am I going to display it? I'm going to use this display sorted scores. So double click on that. It will create my coded section. Try to, hang on. It's probably already done it. If I click on that, oh, hang on. I'm still running the program for some reason. Sorry. It's a bit weird. Okay, no, that seems to be okay. Nothing's changed there. So if I click on that, that's button 2. Double click on it, I get my coded section for button 2. I want to display now the sorted scores. So in this text box, which is called disp sorted, I'm going to say for I equals 1 to total num scores. Okay, what do I want to do? I want to what's it called again? Disp sorted. So this time disp sorted dot text Now, remember I put plus equals scores I, and I'm going to put a dash, but I'm going to put a space dash space, and I'm going to put this plus VBCRLF. Right. Next we're pretty close here, guys. Hang on, that's duplicated next there, so I'm going to delete that one. All right, I reckon we're done. I've probably forgotten something, but I'm going to start. Let's see how we get on. So this starts the program from scratch. Takes a couple of seconds. Here we go. So we've got no syntax errors. That's a good sign. Let's enter, say, a few numbers. 5. I'll go backwards. 3. 1. Remember, we're sorting them in order. 99. Just throw in a big number and finish with a small number. So displaying those scores, 5, 3, 1, 99, 4. So if I sort them, it should be 1, 3, 4, 5, 99. So I sort them and then display my sorted scores, and it's done. There's your program, guys. Duplicate that and you're in business. Hope it helps.